Hello there, and welcome to What's the Point? A question we should all be asking ourselves, and the podcast by brand architect Bill Ellis that will help you discover, clarify, and live your purpose.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to What's the Point? And another terrific guest today, a good friend of mine, Tom Ruwitch, who's had probably now over 20 years of experience helping businesses and individuals thrive using innovative, interactive marketing. And currently, he's the founder and president of Story Power Marketing. Good morning, Tom. How are you?
Hey, Bill. I am glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, it's going to be both good to hear your wisdom, and it's going to be fun just because I know I know you. So let's just start with how'd you get where you are? I mean, well, before we do that, that's probably not a real fair question. Let me say this. I first met Tom when he was the founder of an email marketing platform called MarketVolt, which became one of the largest local regional email campaign platforms in the St. Louis greater Midwest area. So you've moved from that into now you've started Story Power Marketing. Just tell us how that happened. Tell us your journey from email marketing to storytelling.
Sure. And I'll share that by sharing a story. So Perfect. Back in the day when I was running an email marketing software company, my background in sales and marketing was thinking about it as a numbers game, hustle. The more knock on every door and every floor, cold call until your throat was raw, literally burn holes in the soles of your shoes. Not literally, I guess, but yeah. You walk enough miles and the soles of your shoes get holes in them. And just you make enough calls, you push hard enough, you hustle, and the numbers begin to fall into place. And I really wasn't much of a storyteller. And then one of the guys who our vice president of sales at MarketVolt was a guy named Pat Hahn. And he came back to the office one day and shared with me the story of a conversation he'd had with a prospect. And I won't go into all the details except to say that this prospect literally jumped into his arms. That is literally true. Tears down her cheek, saying, thank you, because after describing what MarketVolt software could do for her, she realized that her job, and really in many ways her life, was going to be transformed. It was going to save her time. What used to be a headache and hassle was now going to be a joy and kind of fun. And I came to recognize that the story of transformation from a before state to an after, that's really what we sell, and not software. We sell the story, and right. The software is a means to an end, a bridge from that before to that after. And so I transformed the way I approach marketing and sales, not that long into the journey of running MarketVolt, which I ran for 19 years. Over time at MarketVolt, we sold not just software, but we also sold consulting services, do-it-for-you services. Mm-hmm. And the knowledge that I developed around storytelling and helping people really get to what it is they sell and why it is that prospects buy became part of the consulting that we did. So At the end of 2019, we sold MarketVolt. We merged it with a great company called Benchmark Email. Right. And I founded Story Power Marketing right at the beginning of 2020. Interesting timing to be founding a new company. But I started Story Power Marketing, and what we focus on is helping businesses captivate prospects and inspire them to act by using the power of storytelling to get their message out there.
Well, I mean, that you just summed up in your last sentence the essence of successful marketing / branding, and that is people relate to stories. People want to hear stories that they can put themselves in the middle of, and frankly, you have learned your lessons well. How much did you start to learn that trait from going to the Wayback Time machine to when you were a reporter, both with print and digital versions of newspapers.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I became an entrepreneur, I was a newspaper reporter, and for about 10 years, I was in the media industry, the last 3+ in the digital side of the media industry, working for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and its digital products as they were just getting off the ground. And yeah, as a reporter, you learn to listen, you discover, you learn empathy. You have to put yourself in the other person's shoes if you're going to get the story right. And I don't think I knew it right away, but looking back, I realized that the skills that I developed as a reporter, the listening, the empathy, and so forth, translate in really important ways to the kind of marketing that I now bring to my clients. Because in the end, it is all about putting yourself in the other person's shoes, empathy, understanding what they're feeling. And the more you're able to do that, the more you're able to write stories that are relevant to them, that captivate them, that get them to lean in and pay attention, to like and trust you. And that's the key. That's really the critical thing in marketing.
That's absolutely right. And I want to come back to that. But first, I want to have a takeaway from what you just said, because it's really important. And I want all the listeners to note this. You talked just now about how much your experience in the newspaper game and the media game, the reporting game, turned out to be very much of a blessing and an asset in your current job. And I think that happens a lot, where we have experiences in life and career in any part of our life where at the time we may not realize the impact that's having. But if we're open to learning from our own path, we're going to see that there's been benefit where we never thought there was in the past. That's a very important point, I think.
Yeah, and I'm glad you called that out, because I was working in print media at a time when print media was dying. And so in the moment, I was thinking, what am I going to do? Why did I get into this crazy industry? There are layoffs, it's consolidating. So you're right. I didn't see it in the way I now see it. And that ability to look back, draw lessons from it is something that I'm glad I found. And it's a great point, Bill, to encourage people to do the same.
Yeah, and it's something that I've had the opportunity to also learn from some of my experiences, and that's whether or not the experiences are good for us or bad for us. There's lessons if we look for them, and I think that's the point. Now that you have your current company, first of all, I want to really applaud you from my branding background on the name, Story Power Marketing. Where'd that come from? Give us the scoop.
Well, I knew that I wanted to talk about storytelling, and I have a friend with whom I do some mutual mastermind, mutual mentoring. We get together on a regular basis, and I have a bit of an embarrassing story to tell. At first, I was thinking of naming the company Story Up Marketing. Power up your story, story up. A lot of positive imagery there. And I had actually gone so far as to register the domain, make some logos, and I don't know how I did it or how I missed it, but there is another Story Up Marketing that is out there, and I discovered it a little bit after the fact, and felt stupid for missing it, and had to backtrack on some work that I had already done. It wasn't a big deal. I hadn't really taken the business out to market too much. And I was talking with my friend, and what we really talked about is this idea that when you do all of the things that I am encouraging and teaching my clients and subscribers to do, you really discover power. And it's not power in a you over them kind of way. It's mutual power. When you communicate and connect with your prospects, you are drawing on their power. You are giving them the power to market their business and to connect with prospects. It just is really the power to overcome writer's block, the power to be more comfortable in telling your stories, because it's uncomfortable for many to market their business. So power just felt like a great word, and thankfully story power marketing was available, and we were able to launch the business with that name.
Well, congratulations on that. And again, so much that you bring. I want to unpack a few things. First of all, I very much appreciate your willingness to tell a story that points out that you weren't perfect in your endeavors, because again, an important lesson for all of us, and that is being comfortably enough with ourselves to admit our faults makes us more relatable. I know when I try to position myself as perfect, people can see right through that, because there's not a chance that I'm perfect in any regard. So
no one is. Yeah, no one is perfect though. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's this point, to understand that being authentic, being genuine. And I'm not saying that we should say, okay, here's all my dirty laundry, here, look behind the curtain. But it's not only fine, it's advisable in some situations to say, hey, here's where I misstepped. And that's what you just did. So I appreciate that. But the other thing I want to point out is I think that finding out that there was another story up marketing was a tremendous blessing, because that doesn't, at least personally, resonate with me remotely as much as story power does. And your comment that power is a two-way street, when you're doing that description of, power them, I was thinking about electricity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you can provide electricity and other people have machinery or lighting or whatever that they need to run, then it's a good partnership. And it's not I'm more powerful than you. It's, hey, together we can make something good happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. And going back to the first point about authenticity, really in the end, storytelling is a very uniquely human thing. Yes, other species, other animals bond, but this is something that we as human beings do, and we've done it for millennia, and it is the way that lessons have been taught forever. Our brains are wired to respond to stories. And I talk a lot about this idea of just being human marketing. And so I appreciate, Bill, that you called out the fact that, vulnerability, authenticity, all of the things that come with, admitting a mistake, showing the real you, not putting up a facade. All of that is a huge part of human connection, being human, marketing as a human being. And whether we're talking about storytelling in this broad sense, or talking about how we connect with other people on social media, for example, where we have the option of just rolling bots and doing a quantity over quality play, or we have the option of connecting with people and being human. I'll always lean toward the connect with people and be human side, which includes being vulnerable and admitting your mistakes. So thank you for calling that out. The other thing you were talking about was that notion of power. And I just, when we talk about marketing in general, I think a lot of people get uncomfortable with the idea that marketing is somehow sleazy. Marketing can be manipulative. especially if you begin to talk about people's problems. Oh, I don't want to talk about people's fears or people's problems or tell that part of the story. That's fear-based marketing. That's manipulative. But when we talk about human connection, when we talk about being authentic, you have to meet prospects where they are. If you don't, it's not going to be relevant to them. And most prospects, I would say the vast majority of them are dealing with some kind of problem. Their before state they fear something, they're frustrated with something, they're fed up, they're losing sleep over something. And here's the difference between manipulation, unethical, and persuasion, ethical. And that is that you have a product or service that is of value to your customers, to your prospects. If that's not so, get out of business. You don't belong in business. But if it is so, then persuading them to act, persuading them to buy, is persuading them to act in their best interests. And so when you do that, you are not manipulating them, exercising power to trick them or to have them act against their interests. You are using your power to empower them. And so when we talk about this idea of power, the real underlying thing, to quote Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, is with great power comes great responsibility. Find the power that you have by learning to do the tactics, the strategies, and so forth involved in storytelling and marketing effectively. That makes you more powerful. Use that power responsibly. And in so doing, you're empowering your prospects to achieve something great, to move from a before to after. That's a beautiful thing. And that's where that word power really does resonate. And I agree with you, Bill, that story power is better than story up.
Well, see, and that's, I think, a key point to make here as well. When we tell stories and we are authentic and say we've taken a misstep or more than a misstep, we just totally bamboozled whatever we were doing. That's one thing. The power comes from saying, but here's what I learned. Here's the benefit. Here's the positive side. Here's the lesson, as opposed to, yeah, I did this and someone else had the name, so I just gave up and I went to work at the supermarket, which is a fine job, but it's not what you had intended.
Yeah.
So when you were talking about manipulative sales versus persuasion and influence, and you talked about social media, there's so much there. So first of all, social media, there's two aspects to social media as I see it. One is some of what they call influencers who put out only media that makes themselves look perfect, always, there's nothing wrong with me ever, and that is aspirational. People follow them thinking, oh, it would be so nice to be that wealthy or that pretty or that much in shape or have that kind of travel. But in reality, what you're talking about and the power of story is relational.
Yeah.
And I relate to that person. And that's where saying, yes, I took a misstep and corrected my course. That's relational. And I think that's powerful to point out. The other thing you said is that people need to understand their purpose in business, what the value is they're bringing. And to me, I've always called this, so you have this service or this product, does it pass the so what test?
Yep.
Step one, does anyone care? And if the answer is yes, then the question becomes, how do you communicate that to them? And that's where the story comes into play. So effectively, excuse me, Tom, share with us one or two or whatever you're comfortable with examples without giving up any client confidentiality, but share some of your success, literally your success stories.
Sure. So what I find is that a lot of businesses get into content marketing, email, blogging, social posting, so on and so forth, because it's there, because they have the sense that they need to use it, because people have pitched the notion that you'll grow your business, but they don't really know what it is they're going to say, what it is they're going to talk about, and how to go about doing it. So one client I have is an executive coach, works with high-end business leaders and executives. And one of the things that she coaches them through is how to build flatter organizations. So it's not all top down and so forth. And so one of the ideas, and we've all heard of this if we've been in business, is the importance of delegation. Pretty simple thing. But to my point, yeah, we've all heard that. We've probably heard it a million times. We've probably seen a million blog posts about the importance of delegation. And the process that I went through with this client was to say, tell me about a success story. Tell me about a transformation that you experienced with a client. And she told me the story of a business owner who'd been running the same business for 15 plus years and had never, ever, not once gone on vacation. And how she helped him go on vacation happily. And what she explained was, in order to do that, in order to even give him the guts to walk away for a little while, she had to work with him to begin to delegate responsibility, to put systems in place, to help the people in the company understand when it was necessary to call the boss if he was gone and when it was not, to understand how to debrief so it wasn't a firestorm when he returned. And we told that story in her content marketing. And it was only after we had written a blog post, the headline of which was something like, how a business owner learned to let go and get away. And then the first paragraph was about, a guy who was so locked into his business that he could never go on vacation. Well, anyone who reads that, who's running a company, who could benefit from learning some of the things that she brings to the market, is going to read that story and say, I can relate. And that, in fact, is what happened. The response to that blog post was great. She got calls, she got appointments, she got clients. And I only realized after we helped her tell that story that she had written months before we were ever hired a blog post that was entitled something like Delegate, Don't Dump. And the opening paragraph was, delegating in business is a very important thing that everybody must do, blah, 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 blah. And it sounds like in the old Peanuts cartoons, the teacher, blah, 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 blah. Just the same old lecture or treatise. And so it's a great, I like telling that story because it's a before to after story of a transformation from treatise marketing, just yet another, parade of tips that have no oomph, no connection, no relevance, to a story that really is all about, why should anyone reading this care? Well, why should I care? Because I'm a business leader on the hamster wheel. Yeah. Unable to go on vacation, unable to let go, unable to stop thinking about business when I go home at night. And here's a story of how one business leader escaped it. And that led other business leaders to pick up the phone and contact this consultant. So you asked for a couple. That's one, and I'll shut up for a moment and let you respond.
Well, first of all, I think it might be the first time I've heard the term treatise marketing. So I'll have to do a little embracing of that to better understand it.
It's all over the place, Bill. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, you start to read blog posts and it's just one treatise after another, and it's boring.
I agree that the approach is all over, but the using the adjective of treatise marketing is what's new to me. So my next question is going to come out of left field a little bit, but is that from your Yale education?
Well, yeah, certainly, I wrote my share of essays and I wrote my share of business white papers, and And so we all learn through our schooling, and really many of us in our corporate jobs or even in our small business jobs, how to write a certain way. And the way we learn to write is not really rooted in let's sit around the campfire and tell a story. And the best writing and the best storytelling is conversational, writing writing as you speak, not getting hung up on every single grammar rule. Now, grammar is important for a lot of reasons, and at their root, grammar rules are about creating writing with clarity. But there are plenty of grammar rules that actually achieve disclarity, unclarity. What's our word here?
Muddy the waters.
my English teacher would be disappointed with me for not knowing that word. And so write like you speak, be more conversational, build human connection. And so, yeah, I have plenty of treatise writing, essay writing, boring writing in my past. I've transformed to somebody who will entertain and inform. I like a phrase that I've heard from I think it was Ben Settle, who's a great email marketer, who uses the phrase infotainment, informational and entertaining. And really that's the goal of good storytelling, that you want to entertain them without it being frivolous and meaningless. You still have to provide valuable information, but it doesn't have to be a blah, 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 blah treatise.
Yeah. So when you were just describing that whole difference between your collegiate education and more the sitting around the campfire, that's literally the image I had. The difference between someone lecturing in a big hall where you're expected to take notes and learn things versus that same message being given literally around the campfire or around the kitchen table or around wherever people gather more comfortably. And that's where information is going to be more effectively communicated, because and that's why fiction writing is so huge. You know, people love a story, and if there's messages in it, there's that much better. So you are not just very interested in, skilled in, and proficient in marketing. One of your other interests of many is music. You have started something called the Warehouse Concert Series.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that is a labor of love for me. Yeah. And it goes back to my wife's birthday now 4 years ago. She had a big birthday coming, and I wanted to plan a surprise birthday party for her. And it's a very long story how it came about, but the bottom line is I ended up partnering with a co-working community here in St. Louis called Medici Media Space, and they have office space in front of a giant warehouse, and they carved out of the warehouse kind of a black box theater space that is their event space. And I partnered with them to create a space where we put a bunch of furniture, sofas and comfy chairs and so forth, and kind of turn the place into a giant living room. And what we're doing is sort of mimicking a thing called house concerts, which in a lot of communities, somebody will literally hire an artist, bring them in for a concert in their own house, in their basement, in their living room, and so forth. Invite friends. The friends donate a certain amount, basically drop money in the jar for the artist. The artist gets a decent payday, doesn't have to mess with the noise and the indifference and all that garbage that comes with playing in a bar or a club. The artists love it. The people who experience it, it's a very intimate experience. And so we've sort of created oversized house concerts inside this warehouse called Warehouse Concerts. I bring artists from around the country. We were doing about one a month up until COVID hit. We've put it on pause since, but we're going to get it going again. And it's a real labor of love. And you know, I think I'm fascinated by the creative process, and I want to underline there the word process, because one of the things that I believe is true for songwriting and what these artists do, as well as storytelling and what we do as business people, is that the creation of whatever story or song is not just some act of magic reserved just for the people who have the magic juice, the creativity born in their soul. It's a process, and it can be taught, and it can be learned, and it can be practiced, and it can be nurtured. And so one of the great objections that I hear from a lot of my prospects is, oh, I don't have what it takes to be a storyteller. I don't have an interesting story. I'm not a creative writer, da, 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 da. No, you can learn how to write, how to discover and gather the story, how to assemble the pieces so that you can put out that relevant and captivating content. You don't need a muse. You don't need creative magic. You need process. And that's something that can be learned and can be nurtured.
So for those listening who have that self-belief that I'm not creative, not only am I not a good storyteller, I don't have a good story. Let me point out, and this will be in the show notes, of course, that you can get a free session with Tom. Tell us, Tom, how people go about scheduling time with you to just explore that topic.
Yeah. So I'll make it easy for anyone who's listening to this podcast. You can simply go to email tom@storypowermarketing.com. Email tom@storypowermarketing.com, and in the subject line put free session, and I'll reply directly. Just we'll have a brief conversation, whatever it is you're working on, whatever it is that you want to explore. We can spend some time together on Zoom, and I'd be happy to offer that to Bill's listeners.
Well, I appreciate that, and any of the listeners that take advantage of that will appreciate it. I know that for a fact. When Tom says he will get back to you, believe me, he gets back to you, and he gets back to you quickly. So he is certainly a man of his word, and a man that doesn't waste a lot of time on "I'll get to it later." So don't hesitate. Take him at his word. Tom@storypowermarketing.com. So another of your interests is fishing.
Yeah.
And look at that smile, and that's carried on from your father to you, and from you to your son. I don't know about your daughter, but talk to us about your love for fishing.
Yeah, as you noted, Bill, my father was into fly fishing. He got into fly fishing later in his life, and stuck with it even after he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And in the last months of his life, he was out there fishing, and there were some profound experiences that he had with that. He passed that along to me, and I passed that along to my son Jacob. The smile really was a proud papa smile.
Yeah.
My son Jacob has become a premier fisherman and works both as a fishing guide in Colorado and occasionally in Alaska, as well as a commercial fisherman catching salmon out in the fishing boats in Bristol Bay in Southwest Alaska. So the fishing has really become a great bonding experience passed through generations. That itself is really meaningful for me. I want to tell one quick fishing story that...
Well, let me interrupt you just quickly, because part of the reason I brought that up is, what better venue for learning how to tell great stories than fishing. I mean, people are, the fishermen, the fish tails and all the exaggeration. It was this big. I caught this many. So
Yeah.
I just think it's a great merger of what you do professionally and your personal love for it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's true. And this is a fish story. It's a true story.
Okay.
My son, I was out in Colorado in February a few years back. My son was in school there, and we went fishing. Snow on the ground, but it was a warmish day, and we went out, and I think in 3 hours that we were out there, he caught 45 trout, and I caught 2. and here I was the old man. I was the one who had taught him everything he was supposed to know, which was not the truth by that point. But at some point after that evening, after I had a piece of humble pie and kind of gotten over the shock of watching the kid 25 times as many fish or whatever the math was there, I said, how do you do it? What's the secret, Jacob? And I expected him to give me some, complex answer about knowing this about entomology, insects and fish behavior and blah, 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 blah. And his answer, he paused and he said, I put my fly on the water. And at first I was hoping for more, but what I realized he was saying is what he does is he gets out there and he gets to work. He just gets out there and he fishes and he puts the fly on the water, because if the fly's not on the water, a fish isn't going to take it. Meanwhile, I'm staring at the sky and I'm fussing with a new fly and I'm, tightening my waders and futzing around. And it was such a profound thing for me to hear him say, because, we in business and in life are constantly pursuing mastery. We read books, we buy programs, we watch videos, we spend all sorts of time doing all of this stuff. And pursuing mastery is important for sure. People are listening to this podcast as part of their
right.
pursuit of knowledge and so forth. But you can't just get stuck in all of that. At some point, you just have to get out there and put your fly on the water. And this was he's now 24. This was my 20-year-old kid laying this little profound nugget on me at the time. I just put my fly on the water and I thought to myself, that is a profound and important lesson. And it's a profound and important lesson if you want to be a better storyteller. Just put your pen to paper. Just write every day. Just get out there and do it while simultaneously listening to Bill's podcast, pursuing mastery, finding knowledge. But get your fly on the water or else you won't catch any fish.
Well, that is profound. And if you haven't used that as the title of a story, or even better, a story of a book, I will urge you to do so. Becoming a better writer, here's a little gem that I got from our mutual friend, John David Mann, who's a pretty gosh darn good writer. And one of the bits of counsel that he gave me is, if you want to be a good writer, read good authors. So when we're doing what you said, buying the books and buying the programs, do it from people that know what they're talking about. Do it from people that are good writers, and you'll learn in that way. But then put your fly on the water. I love that title, and kudos to Jacob for that. And yeah, you should do something with that before you try to and find out someone else has done it. So you mentioned your father, and I, from a distance, saw you go through that, and I know what it's like to lose a parent, and I know grieving can take a long time, so continued condolences for that. But the joy that hits your face when you proud papa moment, proud son moment. But the other thing that I want to bring up is some more of the richness of Tom Ruwitch. You have spent a lot of time and effort in, I don't want to say charitable, but in initiatives that help those in need. And I know you've done a lot with the Missouri Botanical Garden. You've done a lot, I think, with the St. Louis Zoo and a lot of organizations like that. But you've also done some things for people with very serious health issues based on some experience you've had with friends. Share with us some of the work you've done there, please, Tom.
Sure. So the one I think you're referring to about serious health issues is I had a friend in high school and then into my adult life whose name was Chris Hobler, a beautiful, beautiful man who at age 35 or so was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And the story of Chris and how he dealt with that is remarkable. When you're diagnosed with ALS, it's a death sentence. There is no treatment. There is no cure. But he and his family formed a foundation, which is now called Hope Happens. And Hope Happens funds research to support the finding of treatments and cures for ALS and other neurological disorders. The story, you know, at some point, I'm hesitating for a moment because I wrote a eulogy about Chris, who died 4 or 5 years after he was diagnosed. And I delivered the eulogy at his funeral, and I still consider it the greatest piece of writing and storytelling I ever did. And, you know, I may put it out on Google Drive, and if you want to share it in the show notes, you can do so. And who knows, if you're listening and this would interest you, it's a story of a beautiful person who did really profound and important things, both before he was diagnosed and after he was diagnosed. And his approach to life and his approach to business and his approach to dealing with the tragedy of his diagnosis carries unbelievable lessons as profound as fly on the water that I'd be happy to share. And yeah, Chris is a, I say in that eulogy that he is an angel on my shoulder who is talking to me constantly and drives me. And a lot of the philosophies that I bring to business and life are rooted in that experience of knowing him and watching what he went through and seeing the courage and the dignity and the grace with which he dealt with it.
That's, speaking of power, very powerful. And I have no idea if any of the listeners are interested. I suspect many are, but I assure you I am. So yes, I will get that from you and add it to the show notes because it's something I'm very curious to read. It's so inspirational in my experience to, as sad as it is, to see people that are stricken with such tremendous malady and how they handle it with grace and dignity and as much as they can, optimism. And not only for the benefit of themselves to make the best of whatever time they have left, but to influence others, family and friends and people that have never in their life met them. And that's what your eulogy will do. So that's another reason I'd be honored to put that in the show notes. Yeah, it was for those of you listening and not watching on YouTube, Tom, you did tear up a little bit when you started talking there. So it's very genuine. And I have a friend who I just 3 days ago found out is diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. So yeah, it happens more than we would like. Back to story power marketing.
Sure.
What is it that you would like people to really understand that you haven't touched base on yet as far as story power marketing? And let me put it in a real simple question that listeners are used to hearing. Tom, what's the point?
Well, I think the point is that most coaches, consultants, business leaders, small business owners feel as if marketing is kind of a dark maze. When it works, great. When it doesn't, bummer. But they're not sure why it worked, what, where'd the prospects come from. And it's frustrating because we spend time being told that this is the can't miss tactic and tool, and then it misses. We hear from tacticians and salespeople who overpromise and underdeliver. And in my experience, the overemphasis on tools and tactics and the latest, shiniest, greatest thing, in lieu of focusing on how to connect with prospects and really understand what's driving them, what their before is, what their desired after is, and then building the story that evokes that. The overemphasis on that other stuff and underemphasis on story makes marketing a frustrating and confusing game for so many people. So if there's a takeaway, the question is, how do you make marketing more predictable and improve the odds and feel a greater sense of confidence and feel a clarity and a greater sense of direction in your marketing? And that is by leaning into, how do I discover my prospects' stories? And the more that you're able to do that, the more you are able to overcome this sense of frustration, this sense that it's a dark maze, this sense of, I have no idea what works and what doesn't. I'll share with you one story that underscores this point. There's a direct response copywriter from the late 20th century, 60s, 70s into the 80s, a guy named Eugene Schwartz. Gene Schwartz was the most prolific of the great direct response copywriters. And he wrote thousands and thousands of ads that made billions of dollars. And he claims he never, ever once suffered from writer's block. I believe him. And when he describes why he never suffered from writer's block, he says this: when we write, when we are creating copy, we are not writing, we are assembling. And what he meant by that is, if we go through the process, and it's work, I'm not one of these guys who's going to pretend that, there's some magic, formula and some button that you push that makes it all just magically happen. There's too much of that BS being spouted out there on the internet. You have to do the work of digging into what makes your prospects tick, discovering the story. Story discovery is what we call it. But the beauty of it is, back to the point earlier, you don't have to have some magic creative juice. You don't need a muse. You don't have to be born with some unbelievable creative storytelling talent. You just have to know the system of, how do I dig in and understand what makes my prospects tick? And if you do that, if you learn the system and implement it, then you gather the building blocks that you need to assemble powerful stories. So when I told the story earlier about my my client, the executive coach, I was following a story discovery process to draw from her the story of that business owner who'd never gone on vacation. Once the pieces were collected, then assembling the story was so much easier and so much clearer than it is when you just sit down in front of a computer and think, oh, storytelling, I need to tell more stories. Stories, that's the big buzz right now. Sit in front of a blank screen and it's once upon a time. Now what? And you've got writer's block. Well, you've got writer's block because you didn't do the work in advance. The work in advance, here's the beauty of it. It's systemizable, it's learnable. A lot of it is delegatable. So as you're growing a business, you don't have to do it all. An assistant can do it, a researcher can do it, whatever it may be. And once you have those building blocks, you can assemble powerful stories as good as any stories that are being assembled. And I think that's a really empowering idea that I hope all of you take away, that it's something all of you can do.
Thank you, Tom. And what I want to say is, as a branding marketing guy, I'm going to blow this right past the concept of this as a marketing tool, because it's so much more than a marketing tool. It's something that is going to help all of us get along better, communicate better in business, in family, in organizations, in general. It's something that will improve your relationships and improve your communication. So it's a very, very powerful and essential part of business. But not everyone that listens to this show is a business person, and that's perfectly fine. But the lesson here is that understanding someone else's situation as best we can and communicating in that concept and that precept so that you are making sense and relating to them is powerful. One other thing, you talked about the fact that storytelling is systemizable and repeatable, and that is true. But it occurs to me that in this case, it's another way to adapt John David Mann's concept of, if you want to be a great storyteller, listen to great storytellers.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean mimic them. It doesn't mean ape them and do exactly what they say. But there are some things that you can learn from people that tell great stories. And you're one of them, my friend. I appreciate very much your time and your wisdom and your insights. Storypowermarketing.com is where you can find all about Tom and the power of story. And all of this contact information will be in our show notes. Tom, thank you so much for your time and for your insights and for your stories.
Bill, it has been my great pleasure. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate spending time with you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We can promise you'll gain value in every one. Rating and reviewing makes us more discoverable and helps others find out what's the point. And if you'd like to know more about Bill Ellis or contact him, please visit his website, www.brandingpillars.com. See you next time.